You know, the hard work that goes with it, you forget about that. It's nice, it's a good job you do. No one would ever want to become famous if you knew what it entailed. It's much better that you don't. You go into the dream and then the reality hits. And if you're lucky, like I feel like I've been, the reality's cool as well, you know. But it's a little harder work than the dream.
Sure is.
My main memory was I want to be there. It just looked like the best party in the world. It looked like the place to be. And it's just to be here. You know, the honesty of it is it's a bit like St. Peter's in Rome is to a Catholic. It's a bit like Maranello is to Ferrari fans. If you love music, you've got to do something in Abbey Road.
Hearts and lives, and that's why the building has this kind of shivery, you know, essence to it.
I think no one was more pleased than I was at the success of Dark Side of the Moon. It certainly wasn't expected. I don't think any of them actually expected to see the success that it had.
There was a battle between the artists and the management to shut the sessions down at 10 o'clock, and Pink Floyd had absolutely no intention of going along with this. And on one session, the manager at the time, Alan Stagg, came in and turned the power off.
Project, I had a very kind of, you know, strong, simple idea of what the thing was about and how it might work. But a lot of effort went into it from a lot of people, not least Alan Parsons.
It also, you know, put quite a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, of course, being the only one.
It was Alan Parsons. He was the engineer, and it was a very important position. He recorded it, you know, clearly very well. I remember thinking at the time, wow, you know, this kid learned something. Because he went away with Dark Side of the Moon and thought, oh, I could do that. And he did. And he obviously did it very successfully. The money sounds I recorded at home, and a handful of coins and this and that, and you know, and a microphone making those recordings, and just chopped 7 bits together and put it in a loop. So I brought it into the studio and we put it on a track with a multi-track, and that happened here, you know, which has something to do with the building, and it's kind of in the walls. The events rub off on the bricks and mortar. And it's not just John Lennon, it's, you know, all the other artists who've been through this place, including Glenn Miller from, you know, and everything afterwards. You know, it's like a baseball fan standing in Dodger Stadium. This was the diamond that Babe Ruth waddled round.
There is no thunder.
Before I made Move It, I mean, I was just somebody who listened to the radio a lot, and I don't know how, I don't remember ever knowing how they got started or how they made records. It was totally an alien world. I don't know that I had any expectations when I first started making records. It was just unbelievable to have actually reached that position where we'd met somebody called Norrie Paramor who'd merely been a name on other people's labels up to that point, who was actually saying to us, let's get into a studio. I mean, it sounded beyond our wildest dreams. So to finally walk through the doors and be taken to Studio 2, with this great big studio that seemed to be buried at the bottom of a foot of stairs, was just a dream. I mean, we just couldn't believe we were actually in a recording studio.
Probably the end of October '58. We were still 16, Hank and I. Cliff was a much older man, he was 17.
We knew when we recorded Move It that something special had taken place. For a start, it sounded American. I remember singing it once at a EMI conference, and a brand new punk band came up to me and said, why don't you record that song? I didn't have the heart to say I'd done it 30 years earlier.
Come on, pretty baby, let's move it and move it.
There were guys walking around in white coats. It was very much like not a hospital, but that sort of field. There were tape operators, there were guys who set up the machines, lined up the machines. We didn't know anything about things like that.
People like Norrie Paramore and George Martin, they actually guided our careers. We weren't considered one-hit wonders by our producers. There was a fantastic relationship, and our careers were nurtured by these experienced older men. And I guess we were all part of the creativity in those days. It was pretty basic, though, because what we used to create was what we rehearsed, and then we came and recorded it. So we made sure when we arrived at the studio that we knew exactly what we were doing, so that we could record 3 tracks in 3 hours.
You get a great buzz from it, you know. I mean, there's not many kids, you know, at 19, 20 could turn around and say, yeah, you know, I recorded at EMI, you know, which became Abbey Road, and it's a world-famous studio now. You know, so I mean, just, you know, having that privilege, regardless of, you know, what else happened, you know, just having to say, recorded at EMI, Abbey Road. Yeah, I did a couple of tracks there, yeah.
I was fresh out of music college. I'd already worked in the BBC music department for a few months, and I was earning my living playing the oboe. But I really wanted to write film music, and I thought, well, I just have to do anything I can lay my hands on. And I did have a letter of invitation to this place to come for an interview. And so I came along here, cycled along here in my old naval greatcoat, took off my bicycle clips and walked upstairs to have an interview with the head of Parlophone. And what he wanted me for, really, was to take over the classical side of the label. The 5 years between 1950 and 1955 were a gradual process of my taking over the reins. I did more and more, and Oscar did less and less. And I was very surprised when Sir Joe Lockwood, who was the new chief of the MI, said, we're going to risk it and we're going to give you the job. We'll put you in charge of Parlophone. And I was shaken by it, but I was delighted. And I knew then I had to make Parlophone something worthwhile.
3, 4.
The first thing I did was to record Peter Ustinov, all sorts of comedians. I'd done the Beyond the Fringe people, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, Alan Bennett and Jonathan Miller, Charlie Drake, Rolf Harris. Sophia was gorgeous and lovely and delightful and very funny.
Can I see your tongue? Nothing the matter with it. Put it away, please.
Maybe it's my bag.
Maybe it
Shall I lie down?
Yes.
Very easy to work with. And Peter Sellers was completely besotted with her.
How flirtatious.
One of my favourite things with him was the Indian voice that he used to do. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely?
My initial diagnosis.
This is how you make love. What?
As far as I can tell.
He was a big star. He was going off to Hollywood and filming, capturing. It was like Ustinov in the early days. I could never quite pin him down.
It is me.
It is you.
Sorry, it is us.
And the technology, well, in November 1950, it was direct wax on a lathe. They were driven by a falling weight. It was wound up to the ceiling for every take. So it was pretty primitive stuff. And we were wanting better equipment all the time. Our equipment, our techniques weren't great. I was hearing records from America that were much better than we were making. EMI, very wisely, sent me over and they said, learn about the studios while you're over there. It was in the 50s, certainly. And I went to Los Angeles and I looked at the studios they had there. They had compressors, they had limiters, they had all kinds of audio devices we didn't have. I came back to England, bubbling with enthusiasm for what they did, and said, we've got to have this stuff. And from that moment on, Abbey Road started changing.
Bass and your guitars, drums. And so it was like you were in the group. There was none of this, like in a stadium where you're kind of 10 yards over there, there's, hello.
Lots of time in this room. Must have been about at least a year, about in total, you know. About that. We used to have a setup over there with tables and, you know, cards and chess sets and various other things. And yeah, we spent a lot of time here, and the lighting system was dreadful.
What EMI did for them was to put in special lighting. And the lighting was 3 fluorescent tubes, one white, one red, and one blue. And it was pathetic.
Just one, like, tall green light, like a street lamp. You know, just one arch with a little shade on it that we put a red light in, you know, just to get a bit of mood.
George Martin and the engineers, and that was it. Then the doors were closed and work commenced.
During the time here, we got in every studio. We got in every cupboard, actually. By the time we'd finished recording here, we did actually record in a cupboard.
We used to work in the studio pretty late at night, you know, and the canteen that's around there is still in the same place, but it's changed a lot, you know. Just used to be a little bar with you could, you know, kettle, you could get a cup of tea or a sandwich, you know. And at night, you know, they used to, you know, the people who worked there would go home and we'd need a cup of tea or coffee or something. So we'd go and do it, open the fridge, take the milk out. There'd normally be a piece of cheese and half a bottle of milk in the freezer, you know. So we'd make ourselves a cup of tea, and they used to complain about that, you know, that we'd stolen half a bottle of milk or something. I mean, it seemed strange at the time, because this is a band that was the biggest band in the world and making hit records, and we couldn't, you know, get half a bottle of milk out of them.
They were unreasonable times. We were doing unreasonable things, and we were making history with it.
Okay, Jeff. Yep. All right, here we go. Okay, Richard. Here comes the thing. Watch it.
Copy from the original document.
The wonderful thing about the Beatles, thought to be a weakness at the time, that they didn't run off to America to get some new exotic recording experiences. They stuck it out.
But I think that the demands of the Beatles, which were enormous, by the way, the Beatles would expect people to be always on tap, so that they would book a session for 2 o'clock and maybe not turn up till 6, and then expect things to happen quickly.
We've got to remember here that they, you know, basically changed every aspect of the music business, you know, the recording process.
They were bang on time. I mean, they were the bus. So it's a gift from God, all of it. And the world is the better for it from them, and EMI, and Abbey Road. And God bless you all.
Why don't we do it in the road?
It's probably should change a bit later on.
I did an orchestra session in this very room, and it was before I knew how to arrange. And I didn't know that the guy who'd written the dots had put a bass rhythm into the orchestra. So instead of it being an enormous operatic chorus, it went into this very, very twee bossa nova. And to my horror, the whole thing was just an absolute mess. I remember this room.
I come back here also to record because my studio isn't very big, the room. So if I ever need to record an orchestra or anything. So I did the overdubs for Beautiful Night. downstairs in the big #1 studio. And I've just done a big orchestral composition down there too. It's a good studio.
I love the recording process because